Okay, so welcome to the Ultra Running Sam. I always get this wrong. Welcome to the Ultra Running Sam podcast. Can't even remember the name of my own podcast because it's changed twice. Mike Seaman, welcome.
Thanks, mate. How are you? You're right.
I'm good. Yeah. So off air, off recording, we were just having a good old chat about Derbyshire and how obviously I'm based in just outside of Derby, and you're from Belper, so I think that's probably a good place to start. So people who are listening and watching the podcast may know who you are, might not know who you are. So just to sort of give us your background without going into too much detail about what pubs we were in at the same time.
I'm a pretty rank average runner. I do a few ultras, and I've been doing it probably for about 15 years now. But I guess I sort of my claim to fame, if there is one, is that I set up the National Running Show, which is a big sort of community-led running show that happens at the NEC in Birmingham in January.
Yeah,
exactly. I think so. Should I talk more about pubs in Belper?
I think we've done all the talking about pubs in Belper. A big shout out to Belper if anyone's listening from Belper. I doubt that they are. So you say you're a mediocre runner, but how did you find running then? Because obviously someone who sets up a national running show obviously loves running. So what's your relationship with running?
Oh, it's kind of a weird one. So I've sort of always been quite active. Like, I love sport. I was pretty average at it. But I would play football. Like, the moment I got home, I played football till dinner was done. Then I go out and play football again. Never very good at it, but I played it a lot and I loved it. And sort of tried to do stuff. And then as I sort of got into my 20s, you know what it's like. You can't commit to being in a certain place at a certain time, and your lifestyle choices change a bit. There's a bit more beer and a bit less time spent exercising. I got a little bit round, and I kind of just I did running because it was a way of making sure I fitted through the front door, but also just doing some exercise and staying a bit healthy. And I just kind of got the bug. I remember a mate of mine got us all to run a marathon together. So like we did like 10Ks and a few half marathons and things like that. And then we all went to Paris and ran the Paris Marathon. And it was, I thought, I remember growing up as a kid thinking a marathon would have been impossible and I would never be able to run a marathon. And we got out there and we did it, and it was horrific. And we made every single mistake. I ran it in a pair of high-tech trainers, which I think I bought from Bacon's in Belper from back in the day. And it was just, I was so unprepared. I made every mistake possible, but it was such a vibe and such a buzz. And then you start chasing it, don't you? And you go, well, what else can I do? What's next? And so I kind of fell in love with it. I ran lots more marathons. I did one and I tried to go a bit faster. And then I kind of, because I was doing it, I always try and do one thing a year to raise money for charity. So I was trying to up the ante with each one that I did. So then I'd do it in costume. So I ran London Marathon in like a massive Lucozade bottle. I ran Edinburgh dressed as an elephant. I did a 3:47 at Edinburgh dressed as an elephant. That was just such a laugh because people were giving you so much banter on the way around. And I loved it. I just had a great time. And then you sort of get to that point where if you tell everybody you're running a marathon, they go, "Oh, but you've done loads of those." So no one wants to sponsor. So I did a 50 miler. I did the North Downs Way 50, which is have you done any Centurions?
No, I hear so much about Centurion races. I think because we're like nowhere near them, it's not really been on. I'm aware that they're really well organised races, and a lot of people, shout about them, but I haven't got in one myself. No.
Oh, they're mega. They are absolutely mega races. Really, really good. That was my first race, and it was my first ultra race, and it was just really lucky to do it. And I trained so hard, like really got into it. I remember I'd get up at like 5 a.m. and like run a half marathon and then go to work, and like just got really like overly into it. And I finished it, and it was just, again, I got that buzz that I got from completing my first marathon. When you cross the line and you're kind of like, oh, this is like, no one else cares. Like, I mean, you tell everybody about it and no one else, apart from your small group of running friends, everybody else just doesn't give a monkeys. So I did that. Then I've done other things. I've done like 7 marathons in 7 days. I've now run 300 milers, and quite a few 50s. I've done 100 Ks and a few things like that. And I don't quite train like I used to, like when I did the first 50 and I took it really seriously. I kind of use running as a way of funding my eating habit, because like I eat so much food. If I didn't run, I'd be like 100 stone. But I just love it. I love the buzz of an ultra, and I love that there's, marathons are hard. They're like to really wear you out, and you've got to really like flog yourself. Whereas like for an ultra, like the way I do it anyway, it's just like a hanging out with your mates and having a picnic on the run, seeing some nice sights. Wicked. That wasn't an answer to your question. That was my running history. But how I got into that was, so I'm like fully in love with running. I think it's amazing. And then I went to a marathon expo and I was like, this is so cool. But why is it the day before the marathon when all you want to do is get out of there, like eat some pasta, not trip over something, don't get injured, get some sleep? And I just kind of thought, well, why isn't there a running show at the start of the year when runners want to buy stuff and get ready for the season? And that was the idea for the running show. And it was like my pub idea. So I go for, like, every events person's got a pub idea. So you have a few beers and you're with an events person, like, if it was my business, I'd do this. And I've wanging on about it for so long that eventually my wife one day just said to me, she said, will you stop talking about it and just do it? So I did. I never thought it would work. I kind of just did it. I didn't think it would be a business. I just did it because I loved it. And the show happened and it was massive. We had way more people than we'd expected. It was snowing and it was at 9 o'clock in the morning on a day in January. I was like, no one's coming. Everyone's going to hate me. Like, all the store holders are going to think I'm a charlatan and I've just tried to do a nice thing. And then there were like 3,500 people at the door before we opened, because runners love to, we get there early, right? And that was it. And then it just snowballed from there. And yeah, it's turned into I don't know how it's turned into a business now. I've done exhibitions all my life, so I kind of know how to run a show, but to make your hobby your job, I think has got to be like the most gratifying thing, really.
So just before we go on about that, just going back to your first marathon when you ran in High Tech trainers. Do High Tech have a stall at the running show?
They don't, but they should. I feel like I could be a brand ambassador. I may no longer wear the High Techs. I think I have moved on a little bit since those days. I might give them a call though.
Yeah, well, it's good promo, isn't it, for them? Yeah, definitely. So, as far as your own running is concerned, then what I know recently you've not long come back from doing a big race, haven't you? What were you doing? Is it the Daytona 100?
Yeah, I just did the Daytona 100 about a month ago now. That was what a brilliant experience. We flew out and just it's almost like 100 miles in a straight line, from Jacksonville Beach down to Daytona Beach, and you're just running. It's pretty flat, and it's quite a lot of road, but actually you're alongside the beach pretty much the whole way. It's like great weather if you like the heat, which I don't, as you can tell from my complexion. But it was just wicked. It was just such a laugh. And I just feel so lucky that I got to fly to another country there were 5 of us that went, and with a group of mates, I've run 100 miles, and then we hung out for a few days afterwards and ate lots of fried food and just did the best. It had the best fun. It was just mega. And to do 100 miler, have you done hundreds? Or, yeah, you know what it's like.
No, I've still only. Carry on. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, mate. I thought you said yes. There was a slight delay there.
No. I'm a 50K specialist, and I've done a couple of 100Ks, but around the 50K, 50 mile mark is is my speciality when I'm not injured. And I always say this, I don't mention this on the podcast that I'm always injured, but I always somehow manage to mention it. But yeah, this year was to be the year that I do 100, but we'll see what happens.
Oh mate, if you've done 100k, you can do 100 miles. It's not that much further. It's like but it's just like the 100 miler is, I mean, for me, it's right, to be honest, it's beyond the levels of what I can do. You know, I'm not a great runner. I don't train I train most days, but I don't live a monk style life. I like my food, I like a drink, and you know, my job's pretty intense and training is sporadic. Running is my hobby. It's also
like most runners then, really.
Yeah, I try not to take it too seriously, because I think it would lose the value that I get from it. Like, the value for me is like banter with my mates, good bit of headspace, and keeps a bit of the weight off. I don't want it to be too competitive. But running a 100 miler, I mean, holy crap. I mean, it is brutal. And you go through where I was like, put some Insta stories up while I was doing it. And it's like the first 20 miles is me and my friend Susie, and we're like running along, and we're having the best time, man. It's amazing. It's great. Then it's like, running's awful. Like, Susie's gone ahead, because I mean, Susie's like, she's like a really, really good ultra runner. So she
Susie Chan.
Yeah. So I mean, she's amazing. She's like become, through the running show, we became friends, and now we live local, so we run quite a bit together. I mean, she's a much better runner than me. But like, she was part of the group that we went out with, and we both did the 100, and then our other friend ran the 50, and she came third in the 50. Absolutely nuts. I did not come third. But anyway, so that was all fine. So we were great when we were together. But then when you split up, you have like a bit of a low, and you can see it's hilarious in the Instagram. And then I went a bit crazy, and like, because I've been on my own for quite a while, so I started like singing songs. Like, I don't really know what I was doing. And then I remember I came into like the 75-mile aid station, and it's so Badwater, which is obviously such an iconic race in the States. Chris Kosman, who's the race director, does like an aid station at the Daytona 100, and it's around like 75 miles. And I remember coming in, and Chris was like, "Mike, you're on a good time." I was only like 5-10 minutes behind Susie at this point, and he was like, "Mike, you look good, man." And I was like, "I feel good." He's like, "You've got this." I was like, "Yeah, man, I have got this." And they were all like clapping me out, and I was like, "I am gonna smash this. I'm a legend. I'm a hero." Probably about half a mile later, I was just like, bang, everything hit the floor. I was just like, I'm done. I can't move a muscle. My feet are on fire. Like, everything hurts. I hate running. This is a stupid idea. Who made me come and do it? And that's the bit, isn't it? That's the addiction, I think, in ultras, is you get to that point where you're on the floor mentally and physically, and you keep going, and you get to the end. And that's kind of, I mean, I didn't set a world record. I think I came like 45th or something out of about 150 people. I think only 100 or so finished, but so I'm very much middle of the pack. I'm not a fast guy, but the achievement of getting across that line when the last 25 miles were like, honestly, like pulling teeth out. I think it just feels wicked.
It's amazing, isn't it? That they say, don't they, that the running an ultra is, especially 100 milers, is like life in a day. That was the famous film, wasn't there, by Billy Yang, did that, wasn't it? Yeah. And it's true, isn't it? You know, I know I've not, you know, done up to 100, but even in like 100Ks, the ups and the downs, like you say at the start, everything's good, everything's rosy, and you've got this idea of how the race is going to pan out in front of you, and you've got it all planned out, and then at some point in the race, it's just the plan goes out the window, and it's just survival mode, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's a lot of like metaphors in running and things like that, aren't there? It's like you can endure a lot more than you think you can, and the highs are never as high as they should. You know, you need to take the lid off the highs, and you need to take the bottom off the lows, because it's never as bad as you think, and you're never as good as you think. I mean, trust me, coming out of that Badwater aid station, I felt like a superhero. I thought I was an amazing runner. I had like, I was going to run sub 24 on like a road race. I'd have been delighted. I did not run sub 24, and it was like my feet were just trashed, and it was really hard. But I you know, I shouldn't have maybe got quite as cocky as I did. But equally, when I've hit the floor, I maybe needed to just cheer up a little bit and remember that I was lucky enough to be in Florida just before Christmas, running a race with one of my mates driving alongside. I mean, my mate John, I have to give him a shout out. John Cosgrove, absolute legend. He drove, him and Sean, who's Susie's husband, they crewed us the entire way. And this guy, I mean, he was up for like 26 hours, driving alongside the road. And he was like so cheerful. He's like, "What can I get you?" He was like, "The guy's a vegan," and I was like, I need a burger. I need a burger. Go get me like a dirty service station burger." I had a burger at about mile 60, which he got from a service station. I think cost him $3. And I swear on my life, this is the greatest piece of food that I've ever had, because it was like, oh, this mega. And it was brilliant, and I loved it. But I think in hindsight it was probably absolute trash. But you know, when you're out there doing that sort of race, these are the highs that you get.
Kind of like having that kebab at 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's the best kebab you've ever had after you've had a few beers.
Now you're talking my language.
Absolutely. Okay, so just going back to the running show then, were you being in that industry, were you aware of that kind of gap in the market for a long time then, or was it something that, I know you said you were sort of banging on about it and then your wife convinced you to do it, was it something that you saw way off ahead?
Yeah, honestly, it took me 7 years to get the guts to do it, because you know, I don't come from a really rich family or anything like that. I didn't have any money. I borrowed my way through uni, and I had loads of debt. And I went down to London and you know, trying to pay off all the debt took me ages. And I had a good job working in an exhibition company. I was doing some really boring shows. So there were shows like business shows, and then there was construction shows, and I did some stuff in fintech and banking, and they were good, and I met some wicked people, but it's not my love, it's not my passion. But you know, I had a good career and I was doing all right, and I paid off my debts, and then it was just I kept talking to people about it, all my mates, and I was like, I think this is a show, I think this is a thing. And they were like, well, will you just do it then? And I was like, yeah, but you know, there's always a reason not to. And I think, you know, if I could go back and talk to myself, I mean, I could have launched it 5 years earlier than I did if I'd have had the guts. But it's really nerve-wracking, like putting your name to a show. And it was fine doing it when I was working for somebody else, but it was all my money. And I remember, like, the first two things I did was I booked the NEC in Birmingham, which is obviously expensive. And then
That was terrifying.
Oh, brutal. And I signed Kelly Holmes as like my keynote speaker, because I was like, I knew that you had to go big to make it work, because we spend a lot, runners spend a lot, but we don't buy big things. So you need like a high volume of people to make it work. So we had to get 10,000 people through the door. Anything less was pointless, because it wouldn't be justifiable for the brands to spend the money to exhibit. So I had to like NEC, Kelly Holmes, boom, everything I had was gone. Like all the savings are on that. And then it's like, right, well, I'm sort of in this now. You just got, it's a bit like when you're halfway through a race, isn't it? And you're just like, well, I paid my money, I'm running, I might as well finish it. There's no point in dropping out now. And luckily, like I had some friends in the community that were really helpful. And I remember when the show happened, we looked like this really professional company, because we called ourselves Racoon Events, and we all had polo shirts on, but they were just all my mates from the exhibition industry, and they all just helped for free, and they all like did different jobs, and they all just helped out. And I think that's really cool. And we had this team we had about I think we had about 30 ambassadors in the first year. We have about 100 ambassadors now who represent the show, and they're not paid. They just sort of come and represent the brand, and they share our values about making running inclusive and sort of, you know, however far or fast you go. And they just all help out for free, and I'm just like, aren't runners awesome?
Yeah, that's true actually. It's such a, I mean, I've been in communities before. Like I've been in, in my early, like in my teens and early 20s, I was into sort of skateboarding and snowboarding and that kind of community, and I had friends that did that and everything. Kind of another grassroots type thing, and then that turned into wakeboarding and stuff. And that was, but getting into running seems like a whole nother level of people willing to put themselves out. So I think probably like to do with the whole volunteering thing. So we used to being volunteers, aren't we, as runners? We used to like turning up to races to help out. Yeah. We understand, don't we, that things don't happen unless you have volunteers. Races don't happen without volunteers. So I suppose that's the same for exhibitions and running shows. It'd be the same for that, wouldn't it?
It certainly wasn't the first year. There's no way I could have done it without all of those people helping. And I think just to sort of take that on, so there's no one in running is a dick. And you know, I've worked in shows where there are people who, you know, they can be quite high maintenance. Some of the celebrities that come along, like that's just not the case in running. Like I've been, you know, it sounds mad, but we've launched a show in the US now. I got to meet Carl Lewis, one of the nicest men in the world, so humble, engaging. Mo Farah came to one of our shows. We literally refused to leave until he'd met everybody that had come to see him, and he was like, he stayed like 2 hours longer than he should. Paula Ratcliffe and Kelly, I mean, they're just Steve Cramp, like they're just mega. These people are just, and they give so much because they actually just kind of love running and they love other runners. And it doesn't really, we have a lot of people who come to the show who are just kind of getting into like a 5K. And then we have people who are ultra runners who are elite, and then we have people who are maybe, you know, just trying their first 50K, and everybody kind of just gels, and it sort of somehow works because you've all got that, you all go through the same waves of pain and endurance, and you know, actually there's no real elitism in the community, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, everyone's very humble, aren't they? I think that's definitely the case.
Yeah, 100%.
So for, you know, the progression of the show then, so when it started out and that big push for the big beginning, how have things changed now to the show that is going to be on in just a few weeks' time?
Well, it's mad. The first show, I think we had about 100 stands, and they were all quite small, and we didn't have many of the big brands there, whereas now I think we have about 300 stands. Most of the big brands are there. I think, you know, it's a completely different beast. We have an ultra stage, we have an inspiration stage, we have a skills stage. And we have lots of interactive features where you can kind of go and get hands-on. You get to meet all the celebs. So the speakers all do meet and greets afterwards, so you can come get your photos taken with them and maybe have a little chat as well. And most of them hang around and are like quite normal. The brands that we have are just insane. I've got, Natalie sent me a list because Natalie's the organized one in our business, so I'll tell you some of the brands, but I mean, I don't want to reel them off, but it's mad, some of the names that we've got. I mean, like Ultimate Direction, obviously for your community, Ultimate Direction, Harrier Trail, you've got Scott, you've got Solomon. We have 2XU, Adidas, Essex Brooks, Garmin, iPro, Mizuno. So like those are big names in running, but we've also got like the stuff that you don't see. So my vision was always, let's make this the coolest running shop in the world. Get all of the people that you would want to meet and get them to come along and be there, like all the celebs. And yeah, just make it awesome. So all the stuff you can find on the high street and all the stuff that you can't. So there's loads of small businesses in there as well that you would never otherwise see. So you get to try new stuff. And you know, I personally think that's exciting because I'm like a nerd about running. I love to try the new things, but the speaker lineup, this is what I'm excited about. So Dina Asher-Smith's our headliner, so she'll be closing on the Sunday. She's mega. Ailish McColgan, Colin Jackson, Chris Akabusi. If you've never heard Chris Akabusi talk, give it 20 minutes of your life. He's the greatest speaker of all time. Joshua Patterson, Jenny Faulkner, Anna Harding, Damien Hall, Gary Robbins, Dean Conazes. I mean, the last three will really appeal to your audience. Sally McRae's there as well. So you have some of the biggest names. Yeah, I mean, they're some of the biggest names in the world of ultra running, and these are proper ultra runners, and they're all there, and they're all just hanging out, and you get to go and meet them. You've got Steve Cram does like a training camp in there. There's like a parkour playground this year. I've no idea what that is, but it sounds cool. And yeah, so there's loads of fun stuff like that happening. So, I mean, if you're into running, and I will say this, I know your audience is mainly people interested in ultras, but this is kind of a running show for anybody that likes running. The vertical is running. So if you're doing your first 5K, or this is your 30th 100 miler, there should be stuff there for you, and it's kind of that full gamut. So yeah, I think it's quite cool.
Who are you most from the ones you've had before, who's been your favorite guest so far that you've had to speak?
It's really hard. So I get asked this a lot. I mean, so Susie and Ewan, so Ewan Thomas and Susie Chan are our two hosts. I mean, I've become good friends with those two now. So like personally, I'd always love hanging out with them because they're brilliant and we have a crack, and they're just such good people. Dean Conazes is quite special to me because his book, I read Ultramarathon Man, and that was what made me try and do an ultra. I thought it was nuts. I mean, when he was ordering a pizza to himself in the middle of nowhere, I was just like, this guy's an absolute lunatic and a legend. And he seemed like this untouchable god that you would never like get anywhere near. And then I met, he came to the show. He's been to one of our US shows and one over here. And he's just the nicest man. And he's actually really humble and actually quite an introvert, but he's changed so many people's lives by writing a book, well, loads of books now, and yeah, he's just the almost godlike stuff that he's done and the achievements that he's made actually just tally up against this really humble, lovely, kind man. So I like him a lot, but to be honest, I'd just sit in the theatres and watch them all day because they're all amazing. I mean, Gary Robbins, I mean, Sally McRae, you know, Damien Hall. I mean, it gets quite exciting when you go through the list.
That's great. I think with Dean Karnazes, like, I wonder if if anyone's tried to work out how many people he has personally like brought into ultra running, because it seems like everybody you talk to who's got into ultra running in the last like 10 years or whatever, I can't remember when his book came out, but I was exactly the same as you. So I was doing, at the time I was training for my first full Ironman distance triathlon. I'd done started off in triathlon and moved into ultra running.
Love the way you casually dropped that in, my first full Ironman. It's like,
who
doesn't do loads of them?
I only ever did 2 of them, but I did loads of sprint and like Olympic distance ones before that, and I did a lot of cycling. And a friend of mine who's a running, we'd kind of been running together a bit, Mark, and we still run together now. We run to the Holly Bush, another story. He gave me this book. He's like, read this book about this runner who eats pizza while he's running like 30 miles. And like, yeah, it just sounds like made up. And I read it, and it's almost like you wonder how you didn't know that this world existed before. You know, I've been a runner for years. I've done running. Why do I not know about this niche that is ultra running? And I read his book, and I was just like, I've got to do an ultra. I don't know why it took me long enough to do, to get into to be able to run a marathon. And I thought a marathon was going to be the furthest I would ever run. And then like a few weeks after that, after I got back from where I was reading this book, and and my mate Mark was like, oh, do you want to, there's a circular route round Ilkeston where he lives. Do you want to do it? It's about 30 miles. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And we just did it. And that was it. Officially an ultra runner. And then like the rest is history, like 10 years later of running ultras, but still haven't ran 100.
Well, but I mean, look, this is the whole thing, right? There's always the next thing. This is the problem with ultras, because then you're like, oh, I'll do a multi-day, or I'll do like, people doing 200 milers now, and it's like, what's wrong with you, lunatic? Yeah. But it's mad how far ultras come in such a short space of time. So again, when I did the Centurion race, when I started running ultras, they were pretty much the only popular big ultra organized. Whereas now you've got like GB Ultras, you've got Ultra X, you know, there's loads of them. I mean, there's loads of them at the show actually, where you can go and do it. I actually just did a Glasgow, as part of the training for Daytona, I did the Glasgow to Edinburgh with GB Ultras, which is that's a good race. That's fast and flat, and it's like a 56 miler, I think. And like they're brilliant actually. GB Ultras, definitely recommend them. But there's so many of them now, and it's like, oh, I've got to go and do this. So I'm doing one with Pegasus Ultra Running next year over in Wales. But now I'm just like, I can't fit it all in because I've got young kids, and it's like, how many weekends away am I allowed before she actually kills me? Because I keep telling her it's work, and she wanted me to do this, but I don't think I don't think that's washing, if I'm honest.
Well, it is your job, isn't it? So yeah. With the running show, have you got any regrets? Is there anything that you would have done differently to this point, so that I thought, oh, that was a big mistake, we didn't do this, or we should have done this?
Yeah, I would have loved to have done it sooner, because I thought it was just such an obvious good idea. It's just, but in hindsight, it's a wonderful thing, isn't it? It's I think that's probably my biggest regret. I think last year was probably, you know, it was quite hard coming out of COVID, but I was really pleased with how we did as a business through that, and how we delivered the show in January. I think this year will be the best show we've ever done. And actually, this is probably the first year where it'll ever be completely what was in my head at the start, like, because you're never happy. Like, so the first show we did, I mean, what came out versus what was in my head was like 20%. And I was like, we can do so much better than this. But then we doubled it, and we doubled it again, and now it's like, I mean, it's massive now. I mean, you can spend a full 2 days there at the show and you won't get bored, because there's so much to see and do. If you love running, it's like just the coolest place to be, in my opinion. But I would say that because I love my own stuff. But yeah, I think regrets wise, I think just doing it sooner. And I think that's the same with everything, isn't it? Like, you never regret a risk you take. It's the ones that you don't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I realised that. So last year, I was a friend of mine. He'd got tickets through the website and stuff for us to go, but I double booked and was away with the family for the weekend. And I thought, it's okay, I can go next year. And the weekends. So I volunteer on the Spine race, and this year they've moved the Spine, so it starts the weekend before. So officially, I'm going to be there for the week into that weekend. So it looks like I'm going to miss the show again. And then I saw that like Damo was he signed up to be there, isn't he, for speaking? And and I thought, so he's going to run the Spine and hopefully try and win it this year, and then he's going to trundle himself off to Birmingham to do.
I mean, these guys are another level. I mean, fair play to him. What an absolute legend. We've had, I was going to say, fingers crossed. But we've had quite a few, because the Spine's always been close to us, and we've had quite a few people come from the Spine. Do it. I mean, you've got to be a hell of a runner to get it done and be done by the weekend or just before, or because it moves around, doesn't it? Yeah. Or we've moved around, I think. But yeah, no, I mean, I hope he's there.
Shout out to Damon.
Yeah.
Hopefully yeah, so I'll see if I can swing by. It's not exactly on my way home from wherever I'm going to be, but I am intending to see if I can at least show my face and just come and see you.
Well, you'd be welcome, mate. We'll do a code for any. So if anybody does want to come and they want a ticket, if they just tell them to use like ULTRASAM at the checkout, and then they'll get a free ticket. So that'll the more the merrier.
Yeah. ULTRASAM, right? I'll get that in the show notes and everything so everyone can get.
I'll better ring somebody in marketing and make sure that code works.
Is this like when you did the one for Bad Boy Running and nobody knew what it was from year to year because it changed or something?
Oh god, yeah, we did. They've been brilliant. Those guys, they've supported us right from the start, and we do an ultra stage with them. And there's always been some random challenges or stupid things that they want to make me do just because I think they're like picking on me. But no, I shout out to them. They're wicked, and they've got a good podcast as well.
Yeah. I it was the first. It was actually the first running podcast I ever listened to, and I thought, if these guys can do it, I can do it. I'm sure they did admit that was true. I've interviewed Jody. But I haven't managed to get David on. I'm going to try and collar him when I see him.
Hello! I'd get him at the show. Track him down at the show.
Get him on. So, what about plans? So, if this is going to be the perfect show for you this year, how can you top it next year? What have you thought that far ahead?
Yeah, always. So, I've got we've turned into like a proper business now. We've got like 30 people that work for us, and we do like 10 different shows now, sort of 7 here and 3, all about like getting people outside. So we've got like an outdoor show, a snow show, running shows overseas, an equine show, some other cycling show. And they're really good. And one of the rules we always have is, you've always got to add something new every single year. So, and we always announce it at the end of the show, because that makes us not get lazy. Because in my opinion, like, shows have to evolve every single year. You have to add new and different. It's always got to be new speakers. There's always got to be some kind of a new feature or idea, and you've got to make it bigger and better, because otherwise it gets boring, and why would you come back? And I think when I worked for a big corporate and we were doing these kind of events, once they get to like 3 or 4 years old, people would just try and sort of squeeze them for cash. So you charge people more money to come in, you try and spend a bit less here and a bit less there. And I just want to make it cooler and better every year. And I think that's the way to sustain it and keep it fresh. So Natalie, who's a good friend of mine, I've known her for years, and she now runs that bit of the business. She will announce on stage on the Sunday afternoon who the keynote is for next year, what the new features are, what we're doing, so that we are straight away onto that. But if anybody who's listening to this looks at the show and thinks, actually, there's some stuff that I would want to see there that's not there, just message us. We're not like some big Darth Vader-esque company. We are people who genuinely love it and care, and we just want to make something that's cool for the community.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And there's definitely the hunger for it, isn't there? With like you say, the way that running is just, I mean, you've got obviously like the pandemic that had a big effect on people, didn't it? With people just getting outside and wanting to run. Yeah. And then you've got people who started running in the pandemic and have now worked their way up to doing ultras like within a couple of years. So I think it's just going to grow and grow and grow every year into it, definitely.
Yeah, and I think we've got a job to do, right? All these people who got out and got active in the pandemic, they were kind of forced to, because it was the only fun thing you could do. And we've got to keep those people engaged. Obesity is a problem in this country, and I'm a big believer that moving is the answer to a lot of the problems. And however you do it, you don't have to be an ultra runner. You can walk a mile and it will make a positive impact on your life. So we need, that sort of getting too preachy, we need shows that encourage people to come in, and we need to create welcoming environments where it's not like intimidating, and it's not just like a load of, I remember I used to think marathons were just all skinny blokes in lycra. And I was quite intimidated going in because I'm not a skinny bloke and I don't look good in lycra. And actually the running community don't look like that. It's all shapes, all sizes, all backgrounds. And I think the more we can show that and demonstrate that and come together as a community and invite other people in, the better. And that's where things like parkrun are amazing, because that's like a gateway into it, isn't it? And it's sort of that steps people in. And then if you get hooked, which you did, I did, then you end up going nuts and going on and doing more and more and more and spending a fortune on gear and doing all of that jazz.
Yeah, there's definitely some spending going on. Running is supposed to be the cheapest sport that you can do. Just a pair of trainers, but it's not, is it? In reality, it's not.
I mean, it can be, and that is the one thing I will say about it is like there's a very low barrier to entry. Like most people can get a pair. I ran my first marathon in my high techs, and you can do it. And people, it's not all about commercialization and spending loads of money, but if it is your love, and the one thing that you do that you really, really get excited about, then you might spend whatever you can afford to spend on it, which is all of my spare cash, which goes on running, get race fees or travel to races or whatever. So yeah, why not?
That's it, absolutely. What better thing could you spend your money on?
Yeah.
Okay. We're just how many weeks away is the show? Is it 3 weeks away?
Yeah, so it's on the 20th and 21st, so it's about 2.5 weeks. So
plenty of time for people to get the tickets using ULTRASAM. We're going to go for that, aren't we? We'll get that on.
We'll do that. So if you go to nationalrunningshow.com, it's on the 20th and 21st of January at the NEC in Birmingham. Use ULTRASAM and you'll get a free ticket.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for coming on and talking to us about our favourite beloved sport of running. I appreciate you giving us your time and all this information.
Mate, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on and giving me an excuse to chat to somebody about running, because nobody in my house cares.
Same in my house as well. Thank you very much. Cheers, Mike.
All right, mate. Take it easy.
Thank you. Cheers.